All right, good evening. Welcome everyone to the Town of Hamilton Board of Selectmen meeting for February 10th, believe it or not, 2020. We will start off, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Announcements and board openings. We have board and committee openings. Council on Aging has an opening. The Hamilton Historic District Commission has an opening, which is an alternate position. The Open Space Committee has an opening. The Essex North Shore Agricultural and Technical School Committee vacancy, which is an appointment by the moderator, but something we're advertising. And the Hamilton Development Corporation has two openings. This is the time in the meeting where we open up the microphone to anybody who'd like to spend 3 minutes on any topic that's not on the agenda this evening. Hi. If you could just state your name and your address.
Yes, my name is Patty Miller, 8 Maple Avenue in Hamilton, Asbury Grove. And I'm here to request that please, that for the next Selectmen meeting, that the corporation's seasonal water situation please be put on the agenda so that we could come to some closure on this. It's been a year, October, and we have a nice discussion. The last Selectmen's meeting, it was going to finance, and I'm anxious to know the result of the discussions with finance, and so that we could come to some closure on this between the corporation and the town.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming.
Mark Johnson, Patton Drive. Is there going to be the new wetlands bylaw, and if so, is there a draft available for anybody to review? I noticed that it's on the warrant, but it's not on the warrant, so I'm just wondering.
On the warrant right now as a placeholder. It's the same. Normally, we don't normally respond during public comment, you know.
No worries. I'll wait. If it's on the warrant,
it's on the agenda to discuss this evening.
I'll hit them.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Let's see. Selectmen and Town Managers report. Rosie, do you want to start over here?
Yes, I just have a few things. So in reference to Mark's question, the Conservation Commission has been a little hesitant to discuss the bylaw until they had a new conservation agent in place, and we do have the new conservation agent, Bert Cummins, and I'm looking forward. I have a meeting with Patrick and Bert scheduled for Wednesday afternoon, and I'm looking forward to meeting him and getting his input. So that has been the holdup, and I apologize for that. And then the second thing is just have been in touch with Mary Beth Lawton talking about the senior statistics in town and their income level. And their income levels vis-a-vis all the competing forces for our tax money. So I'm very excited to talk with Mary Beth about what things we can do to help decrease the tax burden on our seniors. And that's it for me.
Okay, great, thank you. Sean, how about you?
I really don't have too much, just that we do have a handful of open seats on various boards, and nomination papers can still be pulled until pulled and returned by the 20th of February. One for this board, the Board of Selectmen, a town clerk, 3-year term. The Board of Selectmen is also a 3-year term. Board of Assessors, a 3-year term. Planning Board, there are 3 openings. 2 3-year terms and 1 2-year unexpired term. 1 opening for the Housing Authority, which is a 5-year term. 1 opening for a town moderator, which is a 1-year term. 2 openings for 3-year terms for the Hamilton Wenham Library trustees, and then 2 openings for 3-year terms for the school committee. And then also this weekend, on Saturday evening, the AP Gardner Post is celebrating its 100th anniversary with a dinner. So if you're able to attend, stop by.
Great.
That's really all I
Thank
have.
you. Darcy?
I don't have too much other than just letting people know that we had a school committee meeting last week about the budget, and it started out at 13%. I understand now they've reworked some of the numbers, and it's down to 9.44, but it's still needs some work. So we're going to be hearing, I guess, on the 12th when the school committee finalizes their numbers. Is that right, Joe?
Yep, the school committee meets in full session
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Other than that, that's really all I have.
Okay. Thank you. And if it's all right by all of you, what I'd like to do is yield my time to Mike Trumey, who's here tonight, to just give us an update from the Town Hall Building Committee and what's going on, where we stand with that.
Is this the best position here? So you can
Yes,
see?
he said.
I'll try and make this as brief as possible. This is the rendering that we're using as our template for replicating, to historic correctness, I guess you want to call it.
Nice.
So this is our model here. Unfortunately,
If you hold
Here, Mark.
this and use it as a microphone, then people at home can hear you as well.
You can set it right there, probably.
okay,
Might
it'll probably
catch ya.
work. Okay, so. This is our site plan, just so you have an idea of where this is located. This is Bay Road right here. This is the back of the building. This is the addition that we're proposing right now, just so you have an idea. Everything else around the perimeter stays the same. We're working on a site plan. A lot of it has to do with relocating some of the DPW parking, extending the town hall parking, potential cell tower, and also bringing larger trucks here. We're trying to develop something there that's a little more useful. I guess that's a good way to put it. This is a shot from the back of the building. This is the addition here. This would house the elevator and the stair tower. Looking at it from the other side, this is the side entry, which is the north side. Looking here, you can see this is the profile, and this is actually a little bit of a setback from the building. So we're trying to match a lot of the town hall, so it's not something sticking out that just catches your eye. It's trying to blend in. And there's a couple different trains of thought. Don't try to duplicate something because you can't, but don't make it so it sticks out and everybody's saying, it takes your eye. So they've spent a lot of time on the windows, the fenestration, the trim, matching things here that are going on with the roof. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into that. Just to get an idea of how the flow works in the building, this is the addition here. This is the back of the building. So this would be your entry. And this would all be grade level. There'd be handicap parking here. You would walk in and you would have a half a flight up to the first floor, or you would go into the elevator and go up a half level or down a half level into the basement. Most of the interior stays the same as what we've presented before. You still have your main corridors. Building department down here, the health department, treasurer, town clerk, and assessors all stays the same. Planning and conservation would come down to where your office is right now. The lower level plan stays basically the same as what we presented before. You would go down a half level, or you would take the elevator down to the basement level. New vault, break room, DPW, refurbished toilet rooms for the DPW, and storage, as we showed before, mechanical rooms here. So this is also an area that's in flux. It was earmarked to be a swing office or an alternate conference room area. How that all pans out, time will tell. Let's see. It'd be much easier if I did this on a computer. And we have it on a computer. But, let's see.
Work out.
So the second floor, this is where it all got reconfigured from before. The DPW was down this side. This is the back of the building. This is Bay Road right here. This is the stage area. So now, instead of having the DPW along the side here, it's in the back. As you come up the stairs, the existing double staircase, and you enter into the meeting room, or into the ballroom, whatever you want to call it, you still see the stage. The DPW is on either side. So you have the director, the assistant, then you have the water department over here, facilities, new toilet rooms here on either side of the double stair. So a lot of this would present the same as it is now, only this is a little bit smaller. When you look back, you'll still see the same type of trim around, and this will only be up about 10 feet, so you'll still see the old balcony, and there'll be another sub-balcony to it. This will be the town managers and the finance department up on the stage level, so to get up there, elevator would come off here, and you go in, or you go up the stairs. So it's every level is serviced by stairs in half levels, or the elevator in half levels all the way up. So it'd be basement, ground, first, second, and then stage area. So there's. Let's see if I have a shot of the.
Oh, nice.
So this would be the ballroom. If you had your back to the stage, this would be a new railing, millwork. The old balcony would be behind it. You'd still have your ballroom ceiling, as is now. And everything, all of the trim around the stage would stay the same. So it would be very similar to what's there now. And behind this, of course, is the DPW director, and this is the water department here. So it's condensing down the space. The biggest issue we have here is a sound issue. We're trying to go with the old wooden floors that are existing. With all the plaster and the dome ceiling, we have no idea with acoustics, but that's one of the things that we have to tackle. So we've been working for 2 months with the Historic Commission, trying to meet all of their requests. They had a 2-page request. So far, we've met every one of them. They've endorsed this. We've gone to the FinCom, and they have endorsed our approach. So we're trying to hit all the bases, and we're here tonight to explain to you where the design is going, what direction. And based on the town meeting and the vote to go with this option B, this is what we have, and this is what we'd like to keep going forward with.
Looks beautiful.
So, any questions?
Mike, how many seats will the big ballroom conference room be?
I believe it's, I think it's around 75 right now. Some of it has to do with configuration of chairs and egress, things like that. So I think, Jeff, we had a target of somewhere 60 or 70, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
We've exceeded that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I wanted to say 78, but yeah, in that range.
So some of it has to do with how tight you want to make the seat.
Right.
But we do have some flexibility there. We're also looking at the parking. We came up with a way of extending the parking out, making this roadway here just a little bit wider for the large trucks that go in and out. And we're actually...
Let's clarify, you mean, by roadway, you mean the town hall driveway?
The driveway.
We don't want anybody on the neighboring street to think we're talking about their
Access
road.
no.
We're not.
We looked at making it a little bit bigger. How we locate the handicap parking in relation to that doorway coming in for the access to the elevator. Possibly extending some parking here towards Bay Road, but that's in flux also. And then the big thing is extending parking down into the DPW and having a gate there, so on daytime operations, that gate can open and close for the trucks. But then on a meeting night or a larger meeting where there's, I think we had 86 spaces. That might be wrong there, but there were quite a few spaces to extend into the DPW when needed. So a second gate would open, and that would be accessible for parking. And then daytime it would close and just be open to the trucks going through. So there's a few things that we're working on.
Mike, thank you, and it looks great. You're not doing as much demolition in that area, in the stage area, so that must have been good for our pricing?
It has helped.
That's
quite a bit.
great. Can
We're
you?
not lowering the stage floor
Yep.
anymore. The insulation, the building has 3 or 4 inches of insulation, so that's money that will be coming out of the budget. We're not doing the waterproofing around, we're going with what's existing there now, so that's money that's we're saving. So we're looking at cost-saving ideas. Our budget is still what we presented at the previous town meeting, and we're working from that, we're working down from there. So there's still some structural issues here we're dealing with. We hope to have a completed design 2 weeks after Springtown meeting, and we'll have budgets at that time also. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it for town meeting, but that's what we have right now. That's our target.
Doing well.
Right. Any other questions? I feel bad that no one, maybe you don't want to see.
No, I just wanted to thank you, Mike. You especially, your committee has done a tremendous job with this project. I've been impressed as somebody who's been fiscally conservative all along. I've been very impressed and appreciative of how you've held down the numbers as much as you have been and focused on what the costs were, but getting the best value for the community. You've really done a great job with that. And it's not easy. I remember back at the beginning, some of the plans that the architects came in were just, crazy. And you were able to rein them in very quickly and help them appreciate what we needed here. So
we're working on it. We have a pretty good crew. Our committee does a great job. The Historic Commission was great. They actually helped us save some money.
Good.
And they were great to work with. Scott and Ed Howard have spent a lot of time with us, and we had 2 months of trying to meet their requests.
Sure.
And keep the budget where it should be or less, and we've actually come out saving money, so that's a good sign.
Good, very good.
Thank you.
So I hope I stayed under my 3 or 4
Thank you. Yeah, you did. No, perfect.
Sure.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, Joe.
I'll be brief. My town manager report will be online tomorrow, but I hope that folks got a chance to see our fire chief, Ray Burnett, with the help of HWCAM and our own Bobby Gates. He created a short 3-minute video that talks about the Hamilton Fire Department and what it does for the town. It's available currently, I believe, on HWCAM and YouTube, and I think we provided a link to it from our town Facebook page, so we'll redo that again. And I just want to let people know this is something that we're going to try to do with a number of our departments in town, and maybe eventually the boards and committees if they're willing to get on screen for 2 or 3 minutes and really try to introduce what town does for the residents.
Great idea. He did a nice job.
Yeah, he did a great job.
Really impressive.
I appreciate his being the guinea pig, too, because I kind of sent out the word to the department heads, and he was the first one that stepped up and set a meeting time and got it done, so I appreciate that from Ray. I want to remind boards and committees in town that they have until this Friday, February 14th at noon, to submit their drafts for the annual town report. If you are a chair or a secretary with a town, board, or committee and have not already done so, please submit the report to Michelle Carroll in my office electronically. Microsoft Word is preferred. You can include pictures with that as well. The town clerk would like me to remind residents that there are just 10 more days in the nominating period for town elections, and as of noon today, there was no candidate for select board. So, a reminder also that town hall will be closed on Monday in observance of President's Day. Coming up on the agenda here, we have our new conservation agent with us tonight. He'll be meeting the board. I wanted to let the board know and the town know, I had said last week in a very optimistic manner that we had a candidate for community projects manager. Unfortunately, the next day she decided that the drive from her home in Westford was going to be too far. So we are back out looking again. So that's unfortunate, a little bit of a setback for us. And on the regional human resources position, I met last week with the town administrators of Rockport and Manchester. We screened over 20 resumes, selected 5 to interview. The first round interviews will be done by a committee that's made up of 2 staff members from each of the 3 towns. And then they'll put forward their finalists for the 3 town managers, administrators to interview. So hopefully that'll be done. And the rest of it is stuff I've already said before, so I'll let these folks read it for themselves.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, on to our consent agenda for tonight. Approve the minutes from the December 18th, 2019 Selectmen Joint Meeting with the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee. Hamilton Bonfire Gift Acceptance. Appoint Mary Green to fill vacancy on the Hamilton Historic District Commission. Appoint Phil Tachi to fill vacancy on the Recreation Committee. Approve request to Friends of the Hamilton Library to hang book sale banner. Approve request to buy back cemetery plots. And accept grants, 2 at $2,000 each to the Council on Aging. I'll accept.
So moved.
Second.
Second, okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, on to the agenda. We're going to introduce tonight some Hamilton Development Corporation alternates to the board, to us. You're here tonight, thank you. Rick, would you like to introduce?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Jeff. Rick Mitchell, President of the Hamilton Development Corporation. I'm very pleased to introduce 2 associates that have been serving on the Hamilton Development Corporation board for about 7 months, Angela Arvanites and Chad Smith, and they'll stand up and talk to you and introduce themselves. Just a little bit back, Angela is a Hamilton resident and owner of the Monogram shop on Railroad Ave. And Angela has been very active. You've seen her here before the board in terms of the Downtown Business Committee, Business Association, have organized the shop local activity after Thanksgiving. Chad is a Hamilton resident as well and an owner of Marino Smith Realty on Railroad Ave, and he owns the building on Railroad Ave and occupies it and brings valuable real estate experience and business background to the board. Both Angela and Chad expressed an interest in the HDC and agreed to come on as associates because we knew 2 members, Bill Geisness and Tom Goodwin, were going to be resigning, so we thought it would be good to have them come on board and get some background and knowledge and experience. So I'm very excited about the fact that they've volunteered their time to do this. I also want to introduce Tony Passeretti of 85 Linden. Tony is a abutter to the 5963 Willow Street project, and at a recent meeting volunteered to become involved with the HDC as an associate to sort of monitor what's going on at 5963 Willow and make sure there's good communication between the residents and the HDC board. So I'm very happy that Tony has volunteered to do that as well. So with that, I'm going to turn over the microphone to Angela and Chad if they want to answer any questions you have. But as I understand it, what happens now is that this is sort of an announcement of the opening, and then 2 weeks' time, if you find their credentials acceptable, then you will appoint them to the Hamilton Development Corporation board. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Rick.
That's nice.
Rick, if the HDC meets again before the next Board of Selectmen meeting, if you could take a vote as to whether you support their applications, that would be helpful to the board in making their decision as well.
Well, we already do. We wouldn't have asked them to be associate
Okay.
members that they were brought.
I just wanted to make sure that they would have an actual vote, because that's what we're asking the other committees to do, so that's all. Thank you.
Excellent.
If you guys want to say anything, you're welcome to.
That's probably all I would have said. Mainly the only correction, I suppose. I am
State your
resident.
name, Chad, and your
Chad
address.
Smith. I am a resident of Wenham, and I've lived there with my family, my wife and 2 children for, I guess, 9.5 years now. And I have been involved with real estate, and that was kind of interested me with that committee. And recently, about 1.5 years ago, I purchased a building on Railroad Avenue, which has been great, and it's been nice seeing some of the work that's been done in and around the neighborhood. And I've rented out some space on the 2nd floor to a great nonprofit called the Musery. And they've been great tenants and great additions to sort of the neighborhood as well as a whole. So, yeah, we're happy to be there, and it's nice sort of being downtown. and having Angela as a neighbor as well. She's been great. So everybody's kind of playing off each other, and it's nice to be down there. So
Great.
that's sort of the link with the Hamilton community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chad.
Yep.
Angela, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
So like Rick said, you've heard from me before. Downtown business is new for me. I was previously in corporate America, so it's a whole new endeavor for me. Enjoying it immensely. And myself and some of the other local business owners have teamed up to form this Shop Local group, which you've seen us basically trying to do some events in town, also partner with some local nonprofits, and sort of we're working on what our whole vision is for the group in general. But basically we look at ourselves as a bridge basically to build between the business community and the residents. And so this seemed like a perfectly logical way to do that. So hope to be able to help take some of the consensus from the downtown businesses and help feed it through to the town.
Oh, that's great.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Why don't you introduce yourself, Tony? Yeah. You're here.
Tony Passeretti, 85 Linden Street. As Rick said, I'm going to butter to the 5963 Willow project that's in the works, and basically just trying to be a part of the board to be a liaison to all the abutters anyways, and whoever else needs information, so that we don't have any surprises down the road. Sometimes communication does not flow as well as it should, and hopefully I can facilitate that.
Great. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you. It's perfect. Yeah. It's an important time for the Hamilton Development Corporation, so thank you all for stepping up and getting involved with it. Very much. All right. So the next step is, as Rick stated,
Yep. You'll announce it again at the next meeting in 2 weeks, and then you're free to take a vote after that, so hopefully.
right.
they fit.
Do we take the vote, or do we have to announce it again?
I think your bylaw says you're supposed to announce it twice, so tonight's the first
Okay.
announcement.
Yeah.
So you'll announce it again in 2 weeks, and then the vote will be March 9th, the next meeting after that. But there are applications, if you could just fill them out, it's a formality. If you could fill them out and submit them to Michelle, I'll relay them to the board, and you'll be officially candidates for the permanent jobs.
Where do we get them?
They should be online. If not, call Michelle in my office, and she'll send you a link to it, so.
It's just,
On the town website.
Under your office?
You have to ask tricky questions, don't you?
Standard volunteer.
it's a standard.
It's a standard volunteer form.
Yeah,
but
Michelle knows.
The initial one that we filled out from the beginning, because we definitely, I sent a resume, like a,
Yeah.
resume and an application to begin with.
It should be the same for you.
It's probably the same thing.
Probably
If
the
you've
same
done it
form.
already, then we
Yeah.
probably have it on file.
Yeah.
Great.
In fact, I'll make a note to ask Michelle if she's already got both her applications. There's no need for alternates. Then there's no need to resubmit.
All right. Well, thanks again. Okay, on to introducing our new conservation agent, Bert Cummins. Hey, Bert, come on up. Come on up to the podium. State your name in the microphone.
My name is Bert Comans, new conservation coordinator. Started last Tuesday, so a little less than a week ago. I also work for the town of West Newbury as a conservation agent. So excited for this opportunity as well. Yeah, looking forward to keep working on it.
Excellent.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bert was initially chosen by a committee that included Patrick Greffett and the two members of the Conservation Commission who interviewed him, and then he interviewed with me and Patrick a second time after being selected as the top choice of that committee. So he's not a long time in the field, but he has the education. He's pursued his certifications with the state, and he's eager and full of energy. So that's one of the things that I think that the town liked about him. So he jumped in Tuesday and was already reviewing things for the Conservation Commission Tuesday afternoon. So
Excellent. All right. Great. Well, welcome. Thank you. All right. Let's see. All right. Request an increase to the Recreation Revolving Fund.
So, as you know, the state has to authorize how much money can be spent. I'm sorry, the town has to authorize how much money can be spent out of a revolving fund. And because of the increase in programming, there is a need to spend additional money than you currently have. Your current spending limit was $300,000. They've currently expended $237,000 already this year because all of that money comes in from the program fees that they raise and it goes back out to support those programs. With a little less than half of the year left to go, they're concerned, about 4 months ago, they're concerned that they won't have enough if the cap stays at 300. So they have asked and submitted to you this request to increase the revolving fund spending limit to $350. Again, the only money that gets spent out of this is money that comes in through program fees, so it doesn't affect the general fund, it doesn't affect tax rates, it just allows them to spend money and continue to run good programs.
I always have a hard time getting my head around these, but I think I get it.
I've been talking to Sean Timmons for probably about a year about this, and now it's just finally kind of coming to fruition. So this will really help the rec department out, keep things more kind of fluid there. So I make a motion that we increase the recreation revolving fund to, is it 350?
Yes.
$350,000.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. Just as a side note to that, the Town Administrator Wenham and I have been discussing that for FY22, we may be pursuing establishing an enterprise fund for the park, for the rec department and pool together.
I think that'd be good.
But we did not have time to get that together for both warrants this year, so this will hopefully be the last time we have to make this kind of request.
Town acceptance of a private way.
So you
Did we get that? Did they vote on it yet?
No, they don't because they haven't met, because they didn't have enough members for a quorum.
Oh, okay.
So they haven't been able to meet to accept the minutes from the previous meeting, so he wasn't able to give us the minutes prior. All right?
Formality.
Yeah, it's a formality. Sorry about that.
That's okay, sorry.
No problem. So you should have in your packets a note from Patrick Greffett regarding this item. The town has a town bylaw, not a zoning bylaw, that allows citizens, residents of a private way to petition the town to have the road accepted. Under that, they would have to come to you, get it on a town meeting warrant, and then it would have to pass a vote at the town meeting. The current bylaw, I think we brought it, Patrick and I brought this to you, Sean, and, well, yeah. Jeff, you guys should remember last year, we were talking about this because it leaves quite a bit of exposure to the town in terms of the way it would be funded. So we were moving to try to make a change to that. That got sidelined for more important priorities, and now we have somebody making the request to you. So just so you know that that is on the horizon, and I believe there are some residents from that street, Bancroft Way, in attendance, so you may want to hear from them.
Okay. Yes, would anybody like to speak from Bancroft Way? No? Okay. All right.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
You're more than welcome to.
I'm Susan Morgan from number 1 Bancroft Way. We met with the planning board last week to follow up on the petition that we submitted in January. We have some issues on the road that we know need to be addressed, and primarily it's the safety that we're concerned about. So given the fact that we knew the road acceptance policy from 1999 was in place, we were hoping that the town would want to work with us on the safety issues. My question to you tonight would be, we've already started the process under the existing policy from 99. I'm asking for your confirmation that that's how we would go through the entire process.
You have set the clock for yourself with this. So if, for your request to be on, for your request to be taken up, it would be taken up under the 1999 bylaw. Even if the town makes a move to change the bylaw between now and then, it would still follow that process. I will say that the bylaw does not provide definitively that it would be accepted. It just provides a process. So the Board of Selectmen can still recommend against accepting the private way. The Planning Board can still recommend against accepting the private way. And the town meeting can still vote against accepting the private way. But
Still a lot of hurdles to cross.
still a lot of hurdles. And
We're well aware of that.
Given the financial ramifications of such a decision, I do think you probably have an uphill battle, just being honest with you.
Well, I think we need to just go through the process and identify what the safety issues are. I've been told that same thing several times. Hopefully the town is open to listening and making things right on a subdivision that was approved in 1986 with a grade that is not safe, and it's getting worse over time.
Is that the safety issue you're kind of referring to, the grade of the road?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, let's see. Close the ATM warrant to new articles.
Do you all have your lists of articles? Because I'm having trouble finding mine. I'm hoping somebody has one. No, but remember I printed it out.
Can we back up for 1 second?
Yeah.
Can we continue to discuss this private road, private ways
sure,
thing?
of course, yeah.
Just that we've been talking about it for, or at least I've been talking about it for 5 years or so, and trying to make some sense of it and change it so the people on the subdivisions and whatnot on the roads that are subdivision standards and not town standards would be responsible for the kind of upgrades and stuff to the road. And we had kind of tabled it last year a little bit, as Joe said, because we were trying to kind of wrap the whole thing into recycling, trash, plowing, kind of all into one thing. But I think maybe what might be a better route, because that seemed kind of a large enterprise to take on. I think it all needs to be taken on, but I think maybe starting with at least the agreement on 50% of the town sharing the cost with the residents on these private ways, that we at least change that part of the bylaw as kind of a, a kind of a rollout and kind of get the ball rolling on it, because some of these roads in town are going to be $1 million or so to get them up to what the town standard is. And so that would be, $500,000 from us and $500,000 from the neighborhoods, which is a lot from both entities. So, I don't know, and Rick is here from the planning board, and maybe he can speak to Patrick and your discussions at planning board when you discuss this a little bit, and maybe any other recommendations or how you see new subdivisions coming in the town and what standards do you hold them to? Are they town road standards or are they subdivision standard roads?
Okay, so I'm now my planning board hat. So we had extensive discussions on this, and the changes that we've submitted to you were well thought out, and what we tried to do is streamline the entire process so that a resident or anybody that is not familiar with it would be able to read it and understand it.
It was quite confusing before.
Because it was very confusing, and even if you were an engineer, it was a little bit of a stretch to try and figure out what was going on. So we spent a lot of time going, okay, let's make this readable and understandable. And so the end result was what I think you may have in front of you or will have in front of you, and to eliminate the 50% cost share. I mean, we just understood that, when that was made, that was a nice, generous thing to do, but as Sean just indicated, this could become quite costly in the future, and this is not against the people on Bancroft Way in any measure or form, because they're already grandfathered under this discussion, and we would recommend that anyway. But I think we got to close the door and be very clear about that. I mean, we're facing some very serious financial issues, not just this year, but for the foreseeable future, at least 5 years going forward. I think it's in our best interest, and I'm speaking both as a planning board member and a taxpayer, so I would recommend doing that. And subdivision standards, I would have to check I don't want to make that statement as to exactly whether they meet the town road standards, because I'm not an expert enough to know that. And a lot of times with subdivisions, we look at the town road standards and then we go, well, and if I remember correctly, it's a 30-foot way, and we go, that's really way too big for the neighborhood. So a lot of times we'll shrink that down to something smaller and more acceptable that is in the keeping with the nature of the neighborhood.
Right, I remember that discussion from Patton Ridge and Canterbrook.
Yeah, because they really don't need to be that wide, and it has an impact on the neighbors. And again, these subdivisions, and it was very clear in most of these subdivisions, it was very clear what the planning board was attempting to do at that time, which was you're responsible for all the costs associated with the development of this subdivision, the maintenance and operation of that road. So that was very clear in the intent of the original subdivision rulings that the planning board made.
Thank you.
Would you like me to have Patrick prepare some kind of a report for you as to the difference between what may be approved in a subdivision approval versus regular town roads?
Yeah, I'm curious. I know a handful of other roads that are similar to Bancroft and similar situations, so I'm curious as to what the standing is of those roads. Because we've had another, at least besides Bancroft, we had another application 3 or 4 years ago that kind of fizzled out.
Sorry, if I may, on this topic, Mark Johnson, Patton Drive. There have been some instances in town where the infrastructure is appropriate for the street, but the quality of the construction that was there, it was just wrong. And so things like, pipes were old, and now they're 30, 40, 50 years old. And so the whatever should happen, the current conditions should be surveyed to some extent, to some reasonable extent, because you don't want to buy into 10 years left on your water pipes, even though it might have been put in 40 years ago to the correct standard then. If you're looking to buy into it, you're looking to buy into a lot. So that, once again, wouldn't affect Bancroft, but it would. But I think that the hidden costs should be at least looked at from an engineering perspective.
Right. No, I agree with Mark. It's not just the surface quality of the street; it's the infrastructure underneath it as well. Even just the grading, as in the case of Bancroft, or what substrates under the road, drainage, etc.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else on this before we move on?
No.
All right. Let's see. Now we will close the ATM warrant to new articles.
Nope. Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay. Okay. You should have. Do you all have a list that looks something like this from previous meetings? It's been updated slightly. That has what you have. The warrant, the draft warrant you have actually is an old warrant. That's not what you need to be looking at.
This is the October one, right?
That's the one in October. That was just a reference. Put in there as a reference point from the assessing department. If you don't have these, I can make copies of these for you real quick. These are articles that were brought forward by department heads, primarily finance department.
I have it from this afternoon.
Yeah, I don't think I have the.
I know we talked about them at the last meeting. You had them then, but let me make copies for you then.
So far, so good.
So this is old in the way.
So what?
Thanks for coming.
Didn't see the list. What were the gifts for the bonfire?
They're in here.
Yeah.
It's here, let me show you.
One of each and then pass them down.
Yep, for sure.
Just take a little commercial break here.
Yeah, we're in commercial break.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
it's okay.
My mistake. Sean will send them down. Everybody get one. Sorry about that.
Can this go to Rosie and then this one? Jeff? Thank you. Thank you.
Good night, thanks, Chad.
Staple, please.
Mine's not staple.
It's not, okay.
Okay, so primarily, these were all put forward by town departments or, evidence from previous years' ATMs as articles that are kind of standard and need to be addressed. The only new article here from the time we talked about this 2 weeks ago
Citizens
is
petition.
the citizens petition article, which is at the end.
Oh.
So, do you want to go through them and? So the process we set in the schedule for going forward from here is that once you close the warrant tonight, we'll have town council draft the warrant and the language of the articles. And we'll begin the process of putting together summaries that such as are needed for the various articles. And then they'll go to this list will go also to the FinCom. They'll be meeting next Wednesday night, the 19th, a week from this Wednesday, and starting the process of reviewing the different articles and the budgets and making their recommendations. I did meet with Darcy and David Wanger today, and David had asked if the board would consider a joint meeting date of March 16th, since the warrant goes to the printer on the 20th. Currently, you have a selectmen's meeting scheduled for the 9th. And that would give you an opportunity to get your, hear what FinCom's recommendations are, et cetera, if you did that.
Yes, I was going to ask to make sure that we have those recommendations before we vote, so that we understand what all the ramifications are. So that would be great. So you're saying it was the 16th of March that we might have to have a?
It's up to you, but that would be the last day the last Monday that you could do it.
Okay.
Wait,
So-
which one is the citizens petition?
And on the third page, last one, it says, citizens petition for weekly trash collection without fees up to 35 gallons. So the language of that has already been sent to town council, who is reviewing it for us, so.
Oh, I don't have that page.
You don't have this page here?
No, they're all the first page.
Okay.
I passed them down.
1, 2, 3. I have 4 first pages.
Me too. That's what I have.
Who made these copies?
It's okay. That's okay.
It's not my fault you messed up the passing out.
So that's okay, you've got all the second pages. Okay, that's what we have, okay.
Pass all of yours down, Darcy, except for one.
No, these were from earlier today.
Earlier.
These are mine.
So we all should have one that starts out capital expenditures,
Yes.
one that starts out OPEB,
Sure.
and one that starts out lease of town land at Chabaco Road.
Do you need any of this?
No, because I got them from this afternoon.
We
Thank
need
you.
lease of
No, I'm
town
good.
land over here.
They need lease of town land, and I only have.
Got 3 pages of these.
Give, Darcy's got 8 of them over
I've
here.
got a bunch of
so-
them.
Is your
take
town
2 of those.
government at work?
Yeah.
All right, how many people does it take to put together an
There we
agenda?
go.
There
Thank you, sir.
I apologize.
Thank you,
That's my
Joe.
fault.
Thank you.
It's my fault that you didn't have them in your packets. So,
So capital expenditures is 1, OPEB trust is 2, and then lease of town land at Chabaco is 3, correct?
Correct.
pages, yeah.
Excuse me.
Do you want to go through? There's notes on the side of this. This was my handwritten notes during my meeting with David. I was just trying to identify who would go and speak to the FinCom on these items. So
Okay.
that's what those initials are.
Okay.
So do you want to read through each article and
Sure.
if there's any
Can do
discussion
that.
for it? And we'll
Sure.
go from
I
there.
just need page 2 when you have a chance.
You had page 2 original. Take it back.
All right. Capital expenditures, to see if the town will raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds money for the purpose of capital expenditures, and further to authorize the town manager to administer and expend funds from said accounts or take any action thereon or relative thereto. Expected request is $507,000.
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
Okay.
And that number is pretty close to firm, right, Joe?
Yep.
I mean, we've got
I'm not making any
everything totaled
changes.
up.
I'm not making any recommendation to change that, so.
Okay.
And just since we're starting the process here, and I see Duke is sitting with us tonight, that I know the FinCom wants to put in the impact on the tax rate. And also Duke has requested, and we've decided to do that maybe 2 years ago now, Duke, to put on who voted for what when we finally close the warrant.
So that's part of the language of the actual warrant,
Yep.
and we'll be putting that together. Like I said, I'm hoping to have a draft of
Okay,
that
draft,
done by
yeah.
next week sometime.
All right, perfect.
But it's certainly in time for your next meeting, and I'm trying to get KP Law to be here for that meeting. If not that meeting, then the next one after that. He may have, Tom McEnany, our principal point of contact at KP Law, will be our attorney the day of town meeting, because Lauren has to be at Wenham that day.
Okay.
And he has, he wasn't sure when I spoke to him on the phone. He thought he had a conflict with being here on the 24th, but he could be here on the 9th if need
Okay.
be, so either way.
And what day do we have to go to the printer for the warrant?
March 20th. That's when we have it scheduled. It goes to the printer on the 20th, and they'll have it back to us in time to mail out on the 27th. So people will get it a couple days before town meeting,
It's going to be mailed out the 27th?
which about a week before town meeting.
Okay. Anything else on capital expenditures?
No.
Okay, here's the big kahuna right here. Jump right into it. General town departmental appropriations. To see if the town will raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds money to defray the expenses of schools and all other town expenses for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020, or take any action thereon or relative thereto. Expected request.
X.
Actually, we're still waiting on the school department number on Wednesday night to make that determination. And you'll see in the draft that you have, that I have it in here as requested from Monday night as two separate articles. The Article 1 would be to request to approve a dollar amount equal to up to 5% increase to support towns and schools, and request to approve a dollar amount equal to the remainder of the school request.
So just a clarifying question, we're kind of working in tandem with Wenham's Board of Selectmen and presenting similar articles for the school committee. And are they also saying 5% increase in their article, or is it a different amount because they've got override issues?
They're going to have an override either way, so I think it's going to be, they'll be, in actuality, they'll be phrasing it as two different override options.
Gotcha.
So that one override could pass and the other one could not. And they're looking at some kind of similar stratification of it, so.
All right.
And they're looking for an override, the way I understand it, for town.
As well.
Operational and
Yeah.
school district, correct.
Yeah, so.
Okay. So this will be two articles, so people will what, vote on one first?
Yep.
And then
Vote on the
depending
other,
on,
and depending, voting on the other. Now,
Okay.
you know, we can wait to have a fuller discussion about the school budget and exactly what the amount of money in the second article is later on.
Once we know after
Once
this
we know
Wednesday.
for sure after Wednesday what's going on. But
okay.
I'm sure they'll get it down to 5% on Wednesday.
you're an optimist.
Great.
But
Okay.
Joe, I'm sorry, can I ask just a quick question? I thought that the town increase in spending was going to be 2.5.
it is.
And
It
then
is.
the school increase in the first article will be 5%.
Right.
So,
Don't like the wording of it. This
Well-
was informational, but if I can go back and fix that.
okay, just so I understand. So it'll be 5% of the...
enough to cover the town's request, which is about $250,000 increase over last year, and a dollar amount equal to a roughly 5% increase for the schools. And then the rest would be, so
Okay.
I know it doesn't read
It just
exactly that
wasn't
way there,
clear.
but-
Okay, right, and this is not the final product, I understand.
this
All
is-
right, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and to kind of Rosemary's point there a little bit, and I don't know, we're very early in the draft here, but This one, we really need to spend some time with KP Law and ourselves, or Jeff and FinCom and Marissa, and really figure out the wording on this so that it's very clear to people when they come to town meeting what they're voting for, what exactly it means, because we don't want any confusion. The whole thing's confusing enough as it is, so if we can clarify it as much as possible.
Yep.
And in the FinCom's comments that go out with the warrant, it would be great if they also do their due diligence and explain it as well. It'd be great.
The other thing we have to remember is that there may be someone who comes up to amend
And ask
the
to join
two,
the article.
yes, and ask to combine them. So we have to be prepared for that, too.
Right.
You know, we have all contingencies.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things we discussed was not just cents on the dollar increase, but what a particular article will add to, in dollars and cents to the tax amount.
Right,
For
we had talked
instance-
about whatever the increase was, and then plus saying a house at whatever
Correct,
Hamilton's
right.
median was,
FinCom does
would be
that.
this
Yeah.
amount, X.
Right. So that's a little, I think it has more impact than just saying 4 cents on the 1,000. Ah, that's fine.
It's another way of thinking about the problem. You know?
Right, okay, thank you.
I agree with that. I think that's good to have in there.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Good, all right, water enterprise budget. To see if the town will approve the fiscal year '21 water enterprise budget or take any action thereon or relative thereto. The expected request is X.
We looking at like a couple,
Yeah, so the FinCom did meet a week or so ago, and they made a recommendation, which I believe I already forwarded to you all.
I feel I know the number, but I can't think
Yeah,
of it.
and so Tim is reworking based on theirs, but also bringing you a couple of other options as well. That's a recommendation from the FinCom, and Tim will have 2 to 3 options. I expect to offer that water rate to you at your next meeting. Our hope was to have you adopt it in time for the fourth quarter billing, so that we can kind of see what the impact of that was, and as we get into FY21.
Good, okay. Annual financial actions. To see if the town will authorize the following financial actions or take any action thereon or relative thereto. A, to transfer a sum of money from the cemetery sale of lots and grave funds to be used for the cemetery purposes. To transfer a sum of money from the Clark Property Fund to Conservation Fund. And to transfer a sum of money from the Water Enterprise Fund to the General Fund to be used for indirect expenses.
These are annual appropriations that the town makes every year. It's kind of housekeeping.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that? Okay. Community preservation budget. To see if the town will act on the report of the Community Preservation Committee on the fiscal year 2021 community preservation budget and specified other projects and appropriate or reserve for later appropriation monies from Community Preservation Fund annual revenues, specific reserves or other available funds for the administrative expenses of the Community Preservation Committee, the payment of debt service, the undertaking of community preservation projects, and all other necessary and proper expenses for the year, or take any action thereon or relative thereto.
So we have to confirm with Jay Butler and the Community Preservation Committee that they want to have an article on this warrant. They may have a small article just to handle whatever expenses they anticipate for their committee for the year. There have been no requests for funding under community preservation, and given that Town Hall Building Committee will not be making a request at this time and will not be making a request at town meeting, but only doing a report out, there may not be any real big request on this, or any request at all, but potentially.
Right, and we have a meeting on Thursday to discuss
So,
that.
you know, we'll share that the FinCom, agreed to some extent that if there's no requests for funds, there's not necessarily a reason to spend funds. The community preservation money can stay in the bank until we have suitable requests and be filled at that later time, so.
Great. Okay. Annual budget for revolving funds. To see if the town pursuant to MGL Chapter 44, Section 53E1/2 will set the limit on the total amount that may be expended from each revolving fund established under chapter, what is that, 34? Of the general bylaws for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020, or take any action thereon or relative thereto.
So this would be for the pool and the rec, and I would anticipate the pool staying the same and the rec potentially increasing to what you just agreed to increase it in mid-year, 350.
All right. Hamilton Development Corporation, to see if the town will raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money to the Hamilton Development Corporation or take any action thereon or relative thereto. Expected amount.
It's usually 65 or so.
Yeah, 73 or 74. For a while, a handful of years ago, it was 65.
All the time.
Stasis all the time. And we had talked, that didn't quite make sense to us, so we've made it a more real number, I guess, from what the revenues we get from it. Yeah.
Of course, that number can be adjusted upward or downward by you, and it could also be adjusted downward by a motion on the town meeting floor.
Right.
All right. OPEB Trust Fund, to see if the town will raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money for the purpose of funding the other post-employment benefits, OPEB, liability trust funds, or take any action thereon or relative thereto.
And this is our standard.
Yeah, it's going to be $125,000 in this year. There's a new actuarial planned for the very beginning of FY22 in July or so, and we'll probably
switch the
amount later on, but based on the most recent actuarial, that's what we're recommending.
I'm sorry, Joe, I didn't hear what the amount.
I think it's 125, as it has been for the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Okay, stabilization fund, to see if the town will raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money to the stabilization fund or take any action thereon or relative thereto.
This is in keeping with the town's newly adopted, as of last year, financial policies, and this one and the next one are both in keeping with those policies. So.
Capital Stabilization Fund, to see if the town will establish the capital stabilization fund for the special purpose of funding capital budgets and all incidental and related costs, and further to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds money to fund the special purpose stabilization fund, or take any action thereon or relative thereto.
Don't we already have a capital stabilization fund?
It's, again, just like the stabilization fund was established last year.
I know, but it's saying to see if the town will establish.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So it's just a language thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, sorry. See if the town will raise and appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
To fund it.
Yep. Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Good catch. Okay, Patent Homestead Fund, to see if the town will raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money to the Patent Homestead Fund to fund fiscal year 2021 operating costs or take any action thereon or relative thereto. Expected request is?
It was technically $115,000, but then you minus back $43,000, $44,000 that is indirect costs that get paid back to the town. So
will this number for the expected request be the total, the 120, or will it be the 80 like you're talking about?
It will go in there as 115, but we'll explain in the summary.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure that we explain it.
Yep.
That we're kind of paying ourselves back a little bit there, so it doesn't look as big as it really is.
Okay. Master plan, to see if the town will raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds money necessary to fund the cost for a contract for a professional planning agency to assist the town with developing a vision for the future of Hamilton, or take any action thereon or relative thereto. Expected request to be $150,000 from free cash.
So, I had recommended that this be out of free cash because it's a one-time expense. It's been suggested to me that we might want to look for another way to fund it, potentially. So I'll be working with Marissa to see if we can do that prior to the warrant being set. And I think some of that will depend on exactly what the school request winds up being and how much flexibility we have in there. So we will see.
Okay.
I'll try to get that number down out of free cash.
All right. Personal service and union contracts to see if the town will raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds money as may be necessary to fund cost items contained in contracts for personnel services with any individual and/or union, or take any action thereon or relative thereto.
We got 3 contracts?
Two up this year.
Police?
No.
Or fire?
DPW, no, we did police, fire, and clerks last year.
That's right.
We're doing DPW and ECOs this year.
That's
and
right.
then in FY '22, we won't have any contracts negotiated, which will be nice. We'll just have committed ourselves to certain increases. And
we had talked just before kind of you came on, Joe, about seeing if there's any way to kind of line up our contracts a little bit better. Is there any way to do that?
You want them all to be in 1 year?
No, but it just kind of, they seem, sometimes I remember how we had talked about it. We didn't want them all at the same time because that would be a little bit intense for you and all the negotiating teams.
It wouldn't be fun.
But kind of figured out a little more staggered thing because I think we had a bunch of them coming up at once.
So we're currently on a rotation.
Because we had had one that was behind for a while, and then by the time we had negotiated it, we were on to the next kind of thing. So
you had that had been a pass. I believe that was with the administrative union, and that we're back on a kind of a standard pace and cadence with them.
Yeah.
We actually had a pretty uneventful negotiation last year on that. So. You have 3 in 1 year, 2 in 1 year, and you don't have any in an off year.
Right, and I guess
I'm
it just
okay
kind
with
of
that. I'm okay with that level of work. If you want to change it,
right?
No,
and I think
move one to the off year, but
yeah, no, and I think part of the reason why we had that discussion, I think, was because we were behind on one of the contracts. So then when it came in, it kind of set the whole pace off a little bit. So as long as we stay on that negotiating pace and we don't fall behind on a contract, that
I think that
we'll be in good
part of
shape.
the thing to keep in mind is that negotiations aren't something that just take place from January to June in a given year. It really, it's a process, and it kind of gets set with the relationship between management and labor throughout the course of the entire contract. So right now, I thankfully have good working relationship with everybody. That may not always be the case. Unfortunately, sometimes things arise that you don't foresee, but right now we're all in a good spot and working well together, and I'm going to do my best to keep it going that way while looking out for the town's interest at the same time.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Okay, next one. Enhanced Wetlands Protection Bylaw by the Conservation Commission. To see if the town will vote to approve a new town bylaw to provide for additional protections for wetlands and other conservation areas to ensure the protection of these natural resources for the benefit of the community, or take any action thereon or relative thereto. This proposed bylaw is currently being reviewed by the Conservation Commission. Good? Yeah, Mark.
Mark Johnson, Patton Drive. So we have Chapter 27 of our town bylaws. We do have existing regulations within our Conservation Commission. We have our stormwater bylaws. We had something very similar to this in the previous version of the GPOD that the town voted to remove. So just a bylaw like, if this bylaw is in the form like what was proposed last fall, or substantially in that form, it will have conflicting pieces with our stormwater, our existing 27, and our rules and regs. There are some nice things in the new bylaw, a new proposed bylaw, that other towns have in their rules and regs, and we have in our rules and regs. The benefits of having them there is the Conservation Commission can make the judgment on the fly that says this is really important, we're going to stick with it, or this is, for this parcel, this is less important, we don't have to waive it. We can waive it. So regulations are something where the Conservation Commission has more flexibility, and it may be that you want that flexibility. To the extent that this is for groundwater protection, which I'll take it on face value, then it really should be thoroughly coming out of the Conservation Commission, because it affects all of their other documents.
Right.
And so it really needs to be synced. And I worry that whether or not between now and April, we'll be able to sync them up. And so that's an administrative challenge, and it's harder with having a new conservation agent coming on board, because he can study this, but he may not also then study our stormwater and then all the other pieces to it. So I think it's, so as straightforward as it is, I think the solution, finding the right solution, is a little bit trickier. If, as was the history with the GPOD, there was an element of anti-development as part of the history and how it was implemented, that's fine too, because the town has the right to put in zoning to slow down development. Now, if the town wants to do that, it affects property values. I'm perfectly okay with the town doing that. But it means hearings, it means zoning board, it means having the town having an opportunity to say, we want these new rules. We want to protect, we want to adopt this type of strict thing, and it will involve some loss of value maybe for my property, but it's worth it. And it's something that the public meetings and having the zoning board involved is appropriate if there's an anti-development element to it. And I'm okay with either. I just think if it's anti-development piece, then there should be more public, more transparency, more discussion than maybe we can handle between now and March, now in April. If it's for regulating, then you could actually adopt a lot of the good stuff that's in the draft that was in last September, do it in regulations, and you could adopt it without even going to town meeting. The Conservation Commission has most of those things already in their regulations, and it's just a vote of the Conservation Commission to adopt changes to their regulations. So it's up to you guys. It's on there. I'm just saying that it doesn't need to be there, and if it's there as proposed, it will cause all sorts of problems and in conflict with our other bylaws. So it's a larger solution if it's as proposed last fall. If it's something else, that's fine. Anyway, that's.
Is KP Law on this?
So KP Law worked on the bylaw in its current form with Selectwoman Kennedy last fall. I think at that point the FinCom had asked that the Conservation Commission weigh in because it was something that would impact their other bylaws. And the FinCom, and the ConsCom rather, I don't think had the ability at that time to be able to really dig into it. Bert is meeting with them. Bert and Patrick are going to meet with Rosie, and then they're going to meet with the commission. And I believe KP Law is sending an attorney to at least the first meeting, perhaps both of their meetings between now and when you need to finalize the warrant. The hope is that they can understand if this is something they can do now and make a recommendation on, or if it's something that they want to push off, but I think for your purposes tonight, what you're doing is closing the warrant to future articles, to any other articles, so that we can say this is our work that we're going to do on April 4th, or you can always take something off of it, but you can't put it on. You can't put it on if you don't have it in here as a placeholder tonight. That's.
Yeah, I agree, Mark, with what you're saying, and the problem has been that Conservation Commission, since they lost Jim Hankin, they were feeling very uncomfortable about discussing this, and that was the reason why it was pulled, because of course the Conservation Commission, I've been wanting to speak with them about it because they're the experts. This was run through KP Law last fall, and the final draft is what was okayed by KP Law, but that still doesn't mean it doesn't need to go through the Conservation Commission. That absolutely is the plan. And now that we have a new agent on board, Bert, whom we met tonight, we will start the discussions and see how far we get.
That's fine. I just wanted to point out that it wasn't as simple of saying let's go with this, whatever the new language is, because this particular bylaw intersects with 3 or 4 or 5 other pieces of our bylaws. Anyway, thank you.
And you realize this is not intended as a zoning bylaw. It's purely a general bylaw, and that was run through KP Law as well.
I understand mechanically that's fine. I mean, if a town bylaw does not have to go through zoning, it doesn't have to be posted hearings.
Because
but the implications. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should do it as a town bylaw. right? So the consequences of a town bylaw, if it's for anti-development purposes, is much more impactful. And we have a lot of wetlands in our town. We have a lot of landowners who abut wetlands, and that this would affect in possibly a very negative way. And they deserve the right to be able to hear about it, talk about it, attend meetings, understand the implications of it. And so even though the town has the authority to just put it on the bylaw, everybody raise your hand, have 200 people sort of say yes, 200 plus one, 50% plus one. I don't know that we should. And so because so many properties could be impacted by it.
Well, those are all taken into consideration. That's part of what the discussion will be, who will be grandfathered and so forth, and those discussions have already begun. But I will tell you that this bylaw, this proposed enhanced bylaw, was based on the MACC model bylaw, and many cities and towns have this bylaw, version of this bylaw, as their general bylaw. So I think the precedent is that this is a general bylaw adopted to each town.
Yeah, I'll disagree, but my disagreement doesn't matter. I mean, the point is, I just wanted to flag to you that it's not as straightforward as it might appear, and that there's an impact on this that the town deserves the right to talk about more than just at town meeting floor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, amendment to mixed-use development zoning district by the planning board to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw mixed-use development in the downtown district to include new language that seeks to clarify the maximum number of units per proposal or take any action thereon or relative thereto. This proposed bylaw is under development by the planning board.
I guess they're doing multiple studies for traffic and parking, and actually the whole area. They're not focusing, from what we were discussing this afternoon, it's not just traffic and parking, it's everything, pedestrian flow, all of it. So it's
good.
Yeah,
good.
They need to really do that before they.
So we're not sure if they'll have it ready for the time meeting.
Right.
Again, it's just like
Hold
the
it,
previous bylaw.
placeholder.
It could be held and put off to special, but they are looking at it. And it was something they were asked to look at in the discussion around the development on Willow, and they are looking at it. So we're waiting to see what comes out of the planning board there. It remains to be seen whether or not they'll be ready in time for the warrant. And on the traffic and parking studies as related to the downtown, the administration is undertaking to try and get those in place. Would be trying to use Chapter 90 money to pay for the traffic flow study. That's a town-wide project, but focusing somewhat on the signage in the downtown and in other parts of the town. And then we're waiting on a proposal from a consultant to do a parking study specifically for the downtown district.
That the Hamilton Development Corporation.
Hamilton Development Corporation had said that they would pay for it, so I'm trying to get the proposal in front of them so they can sign the contract.
All right.
Sign the check.
Right.
Okay, next up is lease of town land at Chabaco Road. To see if the town will vote to approve a ground lease for a period of time to be determined for use by Shotgun Shooting Club, the Marsh Rat Shotgun Club, only in Hamilton, adjacent to the new solar array on town-owned land at Chabaco Road, or take any action thereon or relative thereto.
So, as you know, the Marsh Rats had been leasing space out adjacent to the landfill for a long time, and during the development of the solar field, they were asked to refrain from that activity. The term of that lease lapsed, and in order to begin to allow them to begin to resuming activities out there, they need to sign a new lease. We did check with Amoresco. We were notified in an email from the president of the region of Amoresco that they have absolutely no problem with the use. It's a prior use, so we don't anticipate a permitting problem, but the Marsh Rats would have to go through the permitting problem with the Conservation Commission. And we put out an RFP that was open last Thursday. They were the only bidder. It was met the minimum requirements of the lease and recommended an annual escalation. And we had suggested in the RFP that we were searching for a 3-year contract. They responded that they would sign a 3-year contract, but would also be willing to sign a 10-year contract if the town was willing to go that far out. If we were, I would just suggest that we'd add some severability language in case we got a better deal. There is some land out there we're trying to determine this year if there's other uses that can be done out there. And if we find out in 2 or 3 years that we could maybe develop some part of that land, I wouldn't want to be tied to a lease on a shotgun club if we can get something better out of it.
3 years is kind of the standard, so I would be fine with sticking with 3 years. I don't know what our last lease with the Marsh Rats was.
Their point was just that they wanted to make some improvements to the space, and that in order to justify that, they want a longer term. The investment of their dollars into improving the space for their use would be justified by a longer term. So, just one thought, one way of looking at it. It's an understandable request. You see that oftentimes with a lease of public land. So they want a longer term so that they can justify the infrastructure improvements that they'll undertake.
But you're saying there will be a clause in the contract which will allow us to have some flexibility, say, for example, if we realize that there's someone that would want to build a commercial endeavor on that land, we could have some, commercial tax money coming in other than the.
Right. We included a standard contract language in the RFP that the Marsh Rats signed off on. Their request and their response that they would like us to consider a 10-year term would change that, and so subject to you agreeing to put this on the warrant, I'll go back and ask KP Law to add language so they'll be offered 2 contracts: a 3-year contract with the standard severability language, or a 10-year contract with an extra clause that allows us out allows us with notice to get out of the contract if we have an ability to use that land for something else that's more advantageous for the town.
A higher, better use, you might say.
Absolutely.
Has there been any talk, and Joanna, you've talked about this, about any of the, we'll say, byproduct of having the Marsh Rats there? Any kind of abatement or whatnot if they, I know they've switched their shot, but they've been there a long time.
Yeah, my understanding is anecdotal in what I've been told, and I haven't, for good reason, wanted to raise the subject with the state, but my understanding is that basically the state had said quite some time ago that it's a continuing operation that's been allowed to exist. We're not going to mess with it, but if it ever stops and you want to do something else out there, we may,
have to abate.
May have to abate. So, not wanting to open that can of worms, I'm in favor of having a new lease.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the new lease, and I wonder if there can be any talk in the negotiations of the new lease about something if and when they do leave, that they.
I believe we included language about them having to clean up from this point forward. I don't know.
Or have them do some type of an escrow account to help.
Would that remediate the lead shot that's all over the place? Or?
We'd have to do a real analysis of the land to find out what's still there. I mean, my understanding from talking to the Marsh Rats themselves is they switched to steel shot during their last contract, at least. And so they've been away from lead for a long time. I really don't know how long that has a deleterious effect and what that, I don't know what you'd find if you went out there now.
All right.
Okay. Debt authorization, town hall project. No article being considered at this time. The town hall building committee to provide a report at town meeting on the status of the project, and I think Mike explained a big kind of hang up, and it was a required part of the process was the Hamilton Historic District Commission's input took a couple months. That delayed the whole process down, which it was a very tight schedule to be able to make that Springtown meeting to begin with. And then when you put that 2-month kind of process through onto that, we miss it.
Yeah,
no matter what we can do.
We had the special town meeting in mid-October. If town meeting had voted in favor of option A, we were ready to hit the ground running, and we would have probably been ready for annual town meeting on April 4th rather. But the minute option B was raised, it added some time. And then that process took about a month and a half. So now we're 2 months off schedule, and that's almost all due to the change, which is understandable.
Well, you want to make sure you get it right rather than getting it fast.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
all understandable.
Yep.
It's all understandable. It's all defensible.
Yep.
You know, in many ways, I think you're getting a better project right now.
I think so, too.
It's just going to be up to us to make sure that we deliver a hard actual number to town meeting voters and to the voters on the ballot, because if town meeting does adopt this at a future, potentially the special town meeting in the fall, it's going to have to go to a vote on the ballot for debt exclusion as well. So the good news is I think you're getting a better product overall, but remains to be seen whether or not the voters want to support it.
Pricing's better.
Okay, application of bond premium. Let's see here. Article in motion to supplement prior borrowing votes to permit the application of sale premium to pay project cost. Simple majority vote. To see if the town will vote to supplement each prior vote of the town that authorizes the borrowing of money to pay costs of capital projects, to provide that, in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the general laws, the premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes thereunder, less any such premium applied to the payment of cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the project costs, and the amount authorized to be borrowed for each such project shall be reduced by the amount of any such premium so applied.
All right.
Wow. How about that?
That's where Marissa comes in.
Marissa.
And the Board of Assessors.
So keep paying our bills.
Yes.
Sounds good.
That the town votes to supplement each prior vote of the town that authorizes the borrowing of money to pay costs of capital projects, to provide that, in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the general laws, the premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes thereunder, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to pay for project costs, and the amount authorized to be borrowed for each such project shall be reduced by the amount of any such premium so applied.
This table will be in our appendix, right?
Yeah.
Can you, if it's not, put in the sunsets on these guys when they're done? You know, all our different bonds when they roll off.
I think we have all that on.
Is it already in it already?
You know, the big spreadsheet.
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
all,
It's
all
on there.
listed.
already on there, okay.
But we can have, we can identify.
Yeah, it'd be nice just for people to look and say, oh, well, this project rolls off then, this one rolls off then.
Yep.
Marissa's good at keeping track of that stuff.
Yes.
Okay, Acts of 2010, Chapter 91. Just a note here that we will need assistance from the BOA and Town Council revision of the Act.
Right.
Is this too?
Yes.
These two things?
Yes. So there's a couple things there. There's, so this one is the existing act, and
Yeah.
the red explains some of what we're trying to do in that.
Okay.
And then there's also a revision to the amendment to the income limitations, in that there was a word missed from the final article. So those two are smaller, and, well, actually, that one's a smaller one. The bigger one is annotated here in red, because town council's already been through it and kind of identified some of the things that we want to address in the Chapter 91 program.
So these are two separate things?
There'd be two
One's a housekeeping and one is a change to the Chapter 91
Right.
Act? Okay.
And then there was a third rather, that is not on your list here, that I just noticed as I was reading through here, and I'm gonna pen it in on mine. But this is also from the Board of Assessors, to allow a pilot agreement to be signed.
Oh, yeah, I see.
That pilot agreement is with a company that's doing a solar array, Select, on the Manchester water plant. Now, the Manchester water plant is owned by Manchester, on land owned by Manchester, that is in Hamilton.
Right.
So Manchester pays us a pilot, because they don't have to pay taxes as a municipality, but they do pay us an annual pilot agreement. And in order for their solar array to go up there, that solar company would also have to pay us a pilot based on the value of the space it occupies.
Sounds great to me.
And this was a lot of work. I think the solar company thought this was going to be a lot easier, but given the two municipality arrangement here, it's a little bit more difficult. They had something for me about a month and a half ago. They were looking for me to sign it. I'm like, I can't just sign this. It's gonna need a couple more things here. So we had the Board of Assessors, the Director of the Assessors, develop what he thinks the new pilot payment should be. We put the agreement through legal, so we'll have that in the article. But that's
so we'll have some amount when it gets a little bit farther down the road.
There'll be an amount on that, subject to. It would be similar in formation to the pilot agreement
we
the
have
town
for our
signed
solar
for
field.
our own solar field,
Right.
but obviously it'll be on scale compared to the size.
Right.
So, going to be quite a bit less than what we're.
Right, it's
gonna
just
get.
on their roof, right, so.
Good.
Do we need to, I guess we're closing it, so we've got it open now, so we can just add it. It's not a big deal.
Right.
We don't have to vote to add it, right?
Well, I'm
Or do
going
we?
to ask you to accept all these things on it, and I'm adding it on mine.
We'll accept it all at once,
So
right?
we'll be accepting what's on mine. Mary Alice, when the vote gets taken, I've got this one penned in, okay?
Okay, that's perfect.
All right, revision of STM Article 3-3, amendment to income limitation for senior tax deferral. General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 41A. Word single was missed from final article.
That was the housekeeping one that Sean just mentioned.
All right.
And then just to back up a second, Mr. Chair, on the Chapter 91, is this kind of in flux as far as language and stuff? We're just looking for final language on it?
Yeah, the town council will be providing final language in the actual warrant itself.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
Yep.
All right, and then finally, as we mentioned, the citizens petition for weekly trash collection without fees up to 35 gallons.
So that was.
Is that the wording?
It basically, it amends the existing, it seeks to amend the existing bylaw by adding a section 3 that requires weekly trash collection with no fees up to the 35 gallons. That is with town council now and being reviewed, and town council will provide an opinion to us and town meeting as needed.
And this
Seems
is an
rather broad.
This is an advisory vote.
I wouldn't say that yet. I want to wait to hear from town council. So this is so as a citizen's petition, it has to be on the warrant. You don't have a choice but to have it on the
Right.
warrant.
Yep.
And what its impact, based on its verbiage and what it tries to do, will be determined by law. So the town council has been asked to review it and make an opinion for us, and we'll be providing that opinion as much in advance as possible. We'll be providing the text of the language to the FinCom for their recommendation, and you'll get to vote on it as far as whether or not you recommend it and why, and it'll be discussed on the floor of town meeting, so.
Gotcha. All right.
Okay, good. All right. So, do we need a motion to close?
I move that we close the ATM warrant for 2020 to new articles.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Okay, update HPP and report on the next steps.
Okay, you should have received in your packets, and this is really just a discussion item, we don't need to go through it. The town has provided back to you, or the consultant has provided back to the town, an updated HPP based on your comments received by the Affordable Housing Trust, and comments received by the Planning Board. I believe the Planning Board took that up at their last meeting. The Affordable Housing Trust has it as an agenda item this week, and when those are all done, assuming they're all approvals, it'll come back to you for final approval. It does require approval of the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen in order to be accepted at the state. It doesn't require the Affordable Housing Trust approval, although my sense was that this board was waiting to see the Affordable Housing Trust's opinion on it before you acted, so.
Right, that was the thought.
So that that has been updated. They took your comments and those of the Affordable Housing Trust into consideration and made some changes, which I think you'll find more with what you were looking for. So.
Great. And as far as just a formal vote from us on accepting it, does Mr. Hubbard have to write any kind of a letter to the state in support, or do we have to, or is it just a formal vote, whether we accept it or
I
not?
think it goes to the state with the votes of the two boards, and I think that suffices.
That's it, cool.
What does HPP mean?
Housing Production Plan.
I imagine there's a lot of other people that don't know what it means too.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Duke.
Okay. And then finally tonight, town manager goals.
Okay, so I took the liberty just to help out the conversation. This is the spreadsheet updated that we used when I first started here 18 months ago, when we met in early November of 2018 to set goals for my first year with the Board of Selectmen. These were, you'll notice all 10 goals are highlighted in yellow because I expect you may want to change some or all of them, but this is just to give us a place, a jumping off point for discussion. And, you know, you can add to these, you can keep these less. Duke, do you want a copy? Does anybody have one? I think I have one for you. And I will take notes and respond as appropriate.
Nice.
Duke, do you want to see this? No. Here, you could take that. Yeah, well, I've got one extra. Do you want it, or you can give it to Duke, or we can make a copy for you for afterwards?
I can take it.
This is going to be, I'm sure this is going to change in the ensuing moments. We're just minutes away from this changing, so.
Are we doing this now? Is it, or?
It would,
Yeah, well, I think if we could take a look at, I mean, I guess the two sections here, the critical functions of the town manager. Those seem to me to be kind of the day-to-day, what are expected of the position itself. I think more importantly is discussing what the, you know, the 5 goals, the 5 or so goals. I don't think there's any magic number about 5. But what are the specific goals for the rest of the year? And we briefly talked about some of these that exist today need certainly to be finished up. Most of them, let's see here, stabilization fund, well, I mean, some of them, many of them are ongoing. So like the Patton Homestead.
yeah, so, I mean, if you're looking for input from me.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
Last year when we met, it was stated as a goal for me to try to find a way to make the Patton Homestead self-sustaining. As I suggested to Jeff in our discussion today, you know, we've had some success in some of the things we wanted to do, but we've also identified a number of other challenges. And to me, success out there doesn't just mean town-owned and municipally run. It could mean town-owned and operated by someone else. It could mean town gifting to someone else, town selling to someone else that operates it in a way that continues to preserve the legacy of the Patton family. I think there are a number of different options for us to look at going forward. When I made the budget proposal and presentation last week, I was upfront with you all that I thought that this coming year would be a year that we would be trying to continue to work the business plan while we also try to determine what the long-term operation at the homestead would look like, and that may not mean municipal ownership. So I'm hoping that the board and the FinCom and the town meeting will ultimately support my request, and that we go into the FY21 looking to make the homestead successful, whatever that might mean. And certainly view that as a continuing goal, but you know, just maybe changing the structure around what that could mean. And I'm interested to hear your feedback, because I know, Sean, you were one of the folks that made that one of my initial goals, and happy to hear your response to that and see what we can work out.
Well, it's also, when boards change,
Yeah,
so do
yeah.
the goals.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
there might be some
Absolutely. So,
changes.
and I say all the time, change is the only thing that's constant in life.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So I have a laundry list, kind of things. And some of them may be small things. Some may be larger things, like the kind of 5 that we have here that Joe's handed out to us. And then other things may be things that we as board members can help facilitate or tackle, maybe not a Joe item, but just maybe as a Board of Selectmen goal, or at least kind of a check-in and update on status. Some things have kind of fallen off a little bit, some things have moved forward. So if you don't mind, I can just read my laundry list and we can make note of them. And then we can kind of either categorize them, throw some out, do whatever, just because I want to kind of get it all out on the table so that we can discuss what kind of goals we have for Joe or ourselves. I mean, I think it's important not just to have goals for Joe, but to have goals for us as a board as far as policy and stuff, because that's what our role is in the community, is to set policy and help our town manager be successful in running the town.
Let me ask you, does this have to do with the attachments, PDFs that you sent a couple of weeks ago from 2013, 15, and 16? I think the Capcom has already done all that work, and I don't see why we should be reinventing the wheel when we already have a roadmap in front of us from the Capital Committee, which includes some of those items. I don't think we need to go back and relitigate it, as a matter of speaking, but I think what we should do is take a look at the Capcom, see what they've put up for goals, and then really all we have to do is prioritize what we want to do first, second, and so on. And as we go, as time changes, the we can also add or remove goals that as we see fit. We don't want to go backwards. We don't want to go backwards.
No, I guess you're misunderstanding the point of me sending those last 5 years of goals for the town manager. It was to look at as a reference. It wasn't to reestablish some of those prior goals. It was to look at for ideas and the way it has been done in the past.
That's what they looked at when they came up with the new Capcom spreadsheet with all the information on it. And it tells you when the debts roll off, and it tells you everything you really need to know.
Yeah, I think there's so much more, though, Darcy.
I actually don't really want to start giving out assignments to independent selectmen. I just don't think that's a good precedent.
I totally disagree with you.
We have to agree to disagree.
Okay.
All right, why don't we start off, Sean, how about this 5-ish goal category? Why don't we start off with that? The major goals.
I mean, I think the first one is pretty much the same, right? We're continuing on that path. We're trying to figure, maybe ensure might not be the right word there.
Right.
Investigate or some other
What
develop.
are the best,
Determine
best
Right.
options, determine
Right.
best options.
Yep.
And then the second one, we've established the capital stabilization fund, so that's irrelevant. And financial policies continue.
I think there's 2 of them left.
No, there's a handful of them left.
Yeah, I know there's a
maybe
new budget template, there's a
6
couple of
or so
others, yeah.
left.
And I know that that's something that we want to get back out in front of FinCom and the board, and we just.
And I have the, and I don't know if Rosemary, you and Darcy have the list from when we started doing the financial policies of what our priorities were on them. We discussed them with Marissa and kind of figured out which ones we would tackle as we went. Do you guys have that?
On FinCom, we did the 2, and then they have a list. The FinCom has determined what they want to tackle next. So that's probably the order we'll be going in, because we want to hear what they have to say before we determine what those policies are going to be. So that's what my suggestion would be.
Yeah, we already discussed it with the FinCom,
Yeah.
though. So, I mean, the list it's the same, I would imagine, so. Do you have it, Rosie?
I don't have it with me.
Oh, you do have it, though, but you just don't have it with you. I was going to
Correct.
forward it to you if you didn't have
Correct.
it, so, okay.
Feel free to send it again. I'm sure I do have it.
All right.
Can never have enough copies of,
All right.
of things.
All right.
And then well exploration, I would say we kind of continue on that path when available.
Yeah. Yes, I'd like to see us continue on that. I think that,
And that kind of ties into 133 Essex a little bit, in what may happen with that parcel, to be determined, I guess. And what's the Chabaco Road? Is that the paving at Chabaco Road?
well, so it was kind of all tied up in that area. Well exploration, exploration of looking at water sites through Manchester, utilizing potentially some of their water if they had excess, Chabaco Road, paving it, making it more functional, things like that. So we've made some progress on one part of that, and I've had conversations with the folks in Manchester. They certainly couldn't provide all of our town's water out of that source, and Tim and I are looking really hard to find where other sources in the North Coastal Basin might exist within the town's borders. It's a very small footprint that exists in Hamilton, but I also began a conversation with Anthony, and he's going to be looking at the topographical maps to see if there's any land in Wenham that's in the North Coastal, because his question to me was, why don't we just partner on this? Why do we both have our own water plants?
Right.
And I said, well, I don't mind the idea of partnering with Wenham, but my problem is we're still using the same water sources.
Right, exactly. We're still in the Ipswich. And that kind of leads me to my next thing on this, number 3 here, is since you were talking about kind of negotiations with Wenham and their water sources, I would say add Beverly into that conversation if we can, and getting into the mayor's office in Beverly and seeing about connecting with Beverly and Wenham to get the water that come our way and figuring out.
Are you talking about going with a sewer system?
Just immediately talking about water.
Oh, okay.
Initially just talking about water.
Yeah.
Are they through
MWRA?
No, not their water sources is Beverly Salem Water. It's
which is us, right? It's
Wenham Lake?
It's Wenham Lake. A lot of it is in Wenham Lake.
But that's
They have a
from
couple
the
reservoirs.
Quabbin, and that's MWRA, I thought.
Don't they have their own water
No,
sources?
it's like
Maybe it's Salem.
Yeah, Salem Beverly Water.
Southern
Beverly Water.
Essex Water District. or
Yeah,
Yep.
something like that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Been that way for years.
They have immense water rights in Topsfield, Danvers, Wenham.
The Ipswich.
Not within their own
No.
communities
Yeah.
that they draw from, so.
Everybody else is.
Saltwater.
So then, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought they were part of the Ipswich River watershed, and that they don't have any boundaries on what they withdraw because of
That's
something.
absolutely right. They're part of the Ipswich River watershed. Their sources are almost all entirely in the Ipswich River watershed, but they're further upstream, and they don't have any boundaries on what they withdraw.
So we're thinking about going with them to take more water from the Ipswich River.
We're analyzing what our choices are for delivering
Yeah.
good drinkable water to our residents without, all the current expense and problems that we have. We're bound by limits set by DEP. We're bound by the cost of running our water plants and maintaining the infrastructure. And this isn't something that would happen in the next year or two, or potentially even 5 years, but we need to start the conversations now to determine what the future water sources would be.
Right.
So we've, Sean, you mentioned 133 Essex, that's only because it's in the North Coastal Basin.
Right,
That's the only
exactly.
reason you mentioned it. There's a couple of other sites that we may have access to be able to test. So we're going to look at what it takes to do that. We had originally talked about doing that with this whole board right after this board came into being.
Right.
And then there was a potential buyer for the land at 133 Essex, and that kind of put a pause on everything. That buyer has withdrawn, so it would be a good time to reach back out to the current owners, and see if they'd be willing to let us drill on their site to see if we can get water.
Joe, I only asked the question because I'm just trying to understand the ramifications of going with Salem or Beverly.
I tried to structure the deal that we were getting our water from Salem and Beverly, and, DP has any questions, they can ask Salem and Beverly, because it's their water source, not ours. And we'd abandon our wells.
I think it's very creative.
Let DP work with Salem and
Yeah.
Beverly, we'll just buy the water.
It's very creative.
That's what my effort would be. I don't know how lucky I'll be, how successful I'll be, but I will definitely try.
I like your style.
And then, so number 4, ensure development of feasible options for town hall reservations, that's kind of ongoing, right? So,
Yeah.
and then master plan inclusive of housing and affordable housing. We talked about that in the budget just now for one of the articles on the warrant.
Yeah, so the housing and housing production plan components of a master plan were done. Even if we go forward with the master plan idea, I'd want whoever comes in to take a look at those reports and, update them. But it would allow us to get them to spend a lot more effort somewhere else, and then reshape the recommendations in those portions based on what they find in the other portions of their research, right? So when you come in to just do a housing plan, you're trying to look at some of the ancillary things, but you have a small amount of money and you're really only looking at housing. And what does the town have? What does it need? What does its residents want for housing? But it's not considering the whole environment of all things, economic development, recreation, open space. A master plan for the town of Hamilton would envelop all of those things and would look at housing as a component of it. So you've got some good work done by consultants on the housing plan and the housing production plan, but now do a master plan and have those components assessed in the environment of the rest of the master plan.
Totality, right? I think as we talk about this, so for question 5, I think a new master plan is a good idea, because I think one of the basic questions is, where is the town going? Where does the town want to go? There's so many different factions who have different ideas, and it seems like it would help the town to be more cohesive if somehow we could find a way to answer that question. What do the townspeople want? We have one opinion based on town survey, but then we have another opinion based on what economically some people think that we need. It's very frustrating
It makes it difficult too to establish a strategic
plan.
A strategic financial
Right,
plan when you don't know what it is that you want to do long term. We have some elements of these things. It's not like the town is bereft of looking into our future, but trying to do that in a space with as much public input as possible, in an environment where we say to people, okay, you chose to move here to Hamilton, you're raising your family here, or you've raised your family here. What is it that you want to see the town be in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? What is it that you love about the town? What is it you would like to change about the town? And try to assimilate that into something that could get a lot of momentum behind it.
And that's what our 2016 survey did. And so maybe I'm just expressing general frustration that.
So survey is a great part to get information, a great way to get some data, but in the plan, what you do is you'd also take that data into public settings and have discourse and, push the edges on those responses, not just say, oh, 58% of people said they wanted this and 52% of people said they wanted this.
Right.
But let's talk about that, and what does that say? Saying that you want senior housing, what does that mean for the town, and how does that get done? And having those kind of open discussions with people who are trained to have those, to moderate those discussions, helps us identify the things that we can do in the short term and in the longer term, and then you can start to build your financial plan around that.
Right, exactly.
So, because even with the capital plan, right, part of the reason we got the capital committee is because if I ask the chief of police what's the priorities for capital infrastructure this year, it might be a different set of priorities than I get from the DPW director or the Parks and Recreation director. Having some other, other ability to pull it all together and answer some of those questions will help us as a town make decisions going forward.
How long would the master plan rewrite take? Do you know?
About a year, probably.
Probably about a year.
About a year.
So if we get the money.
About $500,000, I think, isn't it?
No, not quite.
Generally,
About 200.
For a town our size, I'd say about 150, 200. I have the number and the thing at 150. I'm thinking that we can get some savings because of the work that was done already with the housing plan and the housing production plan. We've got the Open Space and Recreation Committee working on their plan. That information will get assimilated in. It won't be taken and just dropped in. It will be massaged in based on.
Reanalyzed.
Yeah.
Should be.
But all the hard groundwork of collecting the data doesn't have to be done. So we're hoping to get a good bid from a qualified consultant that will be able to direct their deep digging energies in other places and bring that information into it.
I like that. For me, I think a master plan, I think, for me, I would like to see that as a real top priority.
And that would be looking like a quarter of a century ahead?
Yeah,
Or 10
would
years,
think,
or-
you
do about 15
10 to
at
15,
max.
and then in 10 years,
And
you'll start
modify
talking
as you
about.
go along.
Yeah, and modify as you go along, and then in 10 years, you'd start talking about wanting to look at doing another one.
Yeah.
And what you do is you take that set of goals, and this consultant will come in and look at the last master plan you did, I think.
2004?
Was 2004? 2004.
Long time ago.
And so they will come in and take that, and they'll say, okay, against that master plan, what did they get done? What has changed about the demographics of the town? What hasn't changed? And analyze all that stuff, and then set about developing surveys. I really want to find somebody that can involve the community to get input in really dynamic ways, meet them where they are as opposed to make them come to us.
Right.
We
I
have a
like
better chance of getting that, more full input that way, but then engage them so that they will then show up at the public meetings when we have that larger discourse too.
Yeah, I would like to see, and this is in a perfect world, I would like to see less direct, less guided imagery wherein somebody presents something and really listen to what the citizens want. And the demographic is changing, so it's important that people feel heard and to help guide us. And I just think that's a top priority for us.
I agree. I mean, I think to Rosie's point, we want to have as much of the community vested in the process as possible, through surveys and forums and workshops and stuff like that. And we want it to be a living document, not just something that we make and it sits on the shelf for 10 years until we have to make a new one.
Right,
We
exactly.
want to make sure that it's guiding us to where we would like the town to go and being, financially responsible, but also figuring out some way that we can gain some revenues possibly.
Right.
And what's going to happen, because unfortunately we're getting to a point where we're getting stagnant. And, as much as people don't want change in our community because of the way it has been, we need the change to stay the same. It sounds weird to say that, but we need to figure out something, or else the community is it's just gonna flounder. We're gonna have overrides, we're gonna lose community members because of the way the community is changing, and we don't want that to happen. We want to keep the beauty of Hamilton the way it is, but we want to be responsible in the stewardship of what happens in the future.
And that there isn't necessarily just one way to do things. Let's think creatively. I think it's either, we have the people who think that we should do a lot of development. There are people who think we should to do no development. And there has to be a way to
I think there's a meet in the middle.
Both.
And I think part of it too is educating the public on what we can do with smart growth and what our ability is in Hamilton. Like just with the planning board's part of their master plan, we've figured out there's about 7 or 8% of Hamilton we actually can develop. That's a very small number. So we need to figure out in those parcels that make up that 7-8% that we can develop, what's the amount of development, what's the best use, and what's the tolerance for the community. Like if the community looks at that 7 or 8% and say, listen, we don't want it developed, that's fine. That's the town's prerogative and the people's prerogative.
Right, I agree with you 100%.
But we have to figure out the density that those neighborhoods or those areas can work with and have it still fit within the community's vision and have some type of growth so that we can offset the tax base.
And there are also other types of growth. I mean, Darcy's a big proponent of commercial development.
Very, very carefully done.
Exactly. I mean, commercial development.
Right. I mean, we keep talking about New England Biolabs just up the street, and something like that would be great, right?
But that might not be our version. We will think of something that will meet our needs. So just because
Yeah, I want to, if you don't mind me interrupting you for a second, you said, we'll think of something that will meet our needs. That the master plan will help us do that.
Right,
And then
exactly.
then will also help us identify ways to effectuate it. Because
Exact-
coming up with an
right,
idea is
right.
great, but I could sit here all day long and say, hey, I would love to find a place to
Right.
bring a New England Biolabs into, but unless there is
A place.
a willing partner in a place to do it.
Yep.
So what
Well,
we need the master plan to do is not just come up with those ideas, but say, here are a
Here's a
selection of
place.
places you could do that, and here are some
Absolutely.
partners you could reach out to about, that might be willing to do that for
Is
you.
that where maybe mass development or mass
MAPC or whatever.
works? Remember,
MassWorks is a grant program. Mass Development is the quasi-public-private
but they
entity.
do some financing
They do some
and they do
financing for
some
that. Yeah,
consulting.
you could seek them out to.
And
help
maybe that would be an option.
An option to have them do the plan?
Or at least give us some ideas.
Yeah, so
or-
once we have a master plan that identifies what our goals are in terms of commercial development or
Then
if
we
there's
can
residential development,
hire the
we can go to mass
consultant and-
development and have them work with us to help us identify the appropriate developers that
Mm-hmm.
might see Hamilton as an attractive place. So instead of just waiting for somebody to come to us
Yeah.
and say, hey,
Let's
I
be
want to do
proactive.
X, we could be proactive by saying, hey, mass development, we have, or hey, housing and economic development with the state, we have this plan, and it seeks to grow the town in these ways. Can you identify for us developers that can help us do that?
And help finance
And help-
maybe whatever's going on.
And really fully analyze the
Yeah.
costs and
Yep.
benefits. Because we are a unique little town, and people
That's right.
are here for very specific reasons. And
We're part of the diversity of Massachusetts. We're not going to be like Salem or Beverly or Danvers.
and so, right, so.
And
they-
that's what we all came here for. I don't see it changing greatly. And we are part of that diversity. You know, people forget.
Well, so, I mean, one of the things I'd like to see come out of this is what would the town's tolerance be for things like ecotourism? That was one of the things that I helped kind of develop in Winthrop, was the idea of utilizing the marsh as a way to attract day visitors, because there are only 4 great salt marshes in the entire state of Massachusetts. One of them was right there in Winthrop. So how do you, everybody goes to Essex to see the marsh.
Yeah.
How do you get some of those people closer to Boston to go visit Winthrop in the time? That's what we were trying to do. And if there was an appetite for that kind of, utilizing our recreational trails to attract a commercial aspect, get hikers to come out here, and maybe that requires us to find a location for a hiking supply shop to open up. It requires getting into their networks of, we have great places to go hike, there's all these trails, and oh, by the way, you can, after your hike, you can have dinner at this
Yes.
place, and you can, grow the community in a small way, but grow the community in that way.
Yeah, those are nice ideas, and that's why I really would like to see, we are at a crossroads, financially, developmentally, and it's important that we look at this carefully and not lose what's important to all of us.
Right.
While doing what we can to help raise some revenue. And so that's why I absolutely vote for master plan as being absolute top priority.
All right, excellent.
So now, this was all just a discussion about my goals.
I know.
So far, you guys have basically said we're gonna pretty much just update the 5 major goals from last year. Do you want to add to that? Do
Yeah,
you
Sean,
want to
do
be
you
more
have more?
specific about that?
I'd like
Wanna hear
to talk about some other stuff. I mean, some of it can fit into kind of smaller goals and stuff like that.
Yep.
Like as far as number 2, budget presentation and preparation, I would say just kind of the usual, annually kind of we get our audit, and we get a management letter, and there's recommendations within it. I would say, work in your best practices and do what you can to update or get rid of some of those management letter recommendations that kind of check those off the list. Financial policy we talked about. One thing that kind of would go into the master plan and affordable housing category would be, I think maybe even this year or next year, the homes on Annie's Lane and Ricker Circle come off of their, what's the word I'm looking for?
Deed restrictions.
Deed restrictions.
Restrictions rotate off, yeah.
And so that's going to take our housing stock down a little bit in our affordable housing. So
Yes.
is there some mechanism we can talk to those people or figure out how to fill that gap. that we're
Affordable
gonna
Housing
lose?
Trust was already trying to start that conversation. The question I have, well, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but, you know, these folks bought their property X number of years ago with the
Right.
understanding that
With the
it's deed
understanding they could
restricted
sell it
for a
as a
certain amount of
Taxes-
years.
Were the
Right.
taxes moderated for that?
There was an assumption that the value was different because they bought it as an affordable housing.
Will that change?
But those taxes have grown over the term of ownership, and it would change, once it loses its deed
Right.
restriction, it would be,
market rate.
it would be market rate, and their taxes will go up to market rate. So I believe the Affordable Housing Trust was already planning to work, was already discussing, reaching out to them to see if they'd be willing to continue their deed restriction. I don't know if that would be for a period of terms, a period of years or what, but certainly the town would be happy to accept an extension if those folks wanted to offer.
Right, so as long as there's some kind of discussions going on, I think that's.
But that's an interesting point, to talk about the tax rates. And that might be a sort of a little bit of a carrot. You know, it'll help the town and it will help them if they stay under deed restriction for X amount of time more.
Well, yeah, I mean, conceivably it could help them. It really just depends on what stage of life they're at. And
Of course, right.
Right, that's true.
I think anybody who pays taxes is at that stage of life where you need to be considerate.
Right, and then we've recently discussed, and it was part of one of the capital asks, but it was taken off, was the DPW yards filling station, the tank. And with Wenham, I would think that would be a goal, is to work out that.
On it.
I mean, he's already on it, but it'd be good to put it down. And one we talked about tonight was the approved roads bylaw, and kind of figuring out that with kind of all the factors in trash, the road, the recycling, the plowing, the whole kind of sticky wicket that we've got going on with that. And Darcy's talked about this before with Winthrop School, and I've talked to the planning board and Patrick a little bit about considering rezoning that area. And so maybe that's a conversation we start to have this year and start to have with the schools and their leases and what our future plans are for that area. The MVP, Mass Vulnerability Plan, we've kind of stalled on that a little bit. I don't know what's left to get done with it. Is it pretty much?
It's done.
It's done.
It's been submitted to the state.
Just waiting for your back.
Once it's been accepted, I can check on where the status of that is. Once it gets accepted, I would anticipate potentially in March being notified that we'd be eligible to apply for a grant.
Right, that kind of leads me into the
opportunities if we
grants
needed,
options and stuff like
if there was
that.
anything we could identify as useful, so.
And then any other community compacts, like I know we're doing an HR thing right now with other communities, and we talked about doing IT, and that might be another discussion we have with the schools as well, kind of a joint services thing, or look into another community compact, or what community compacts are available that might fit some of our needs.
So just to fill you in on that, I guess maybe I haven't been open enough about what that is, but the town did join a community compact request for a feasibility study for regional IT with 7 other towns last year. Recently they completed their report on the feasibility study, found identified areas.
We have a couple people drop out of that. Was that the one, or was that I thought we had another community maybe drop out of something.
No, I don't think so.
No, it wasn't that one.
I don't recall anybody that dropped out.
Confusing me.
But if we, they've identified a kind of a plan and options, and actually, one of the things that we're looking at is transitioning the town's assessing software, for instance, from Vision to Patriot. Was a recommendation of the Board of Assessors, the Director of Assessors, who prefers that software, and Vision has a very large price tag for a necessary upgrade this year. We were thinking of using a portion of that money and transitioning to Patriot instead, and avoiding the upgrade. It turns out we may actually be getting offered an opportunity to purchase Patriot, but through a partnership with Danvers at a lesser price, and we'd still get the benefit of having transitioned to. So that would be a regional effort to provide us with assessing software. So we're using that regional IT feasibility study as a way to try to open some doors. There is a need for more full collaboration between the communities, there's going to be a need to do some work on getting some infrastructure developed. So, for instance, you know, we have fiber that connects Hamilton and Wenham, Essex, and has a need to be connected, and then we need to complete the loop. So we are looking to connect from Wenham down to Beverly, and then
Is this a municipal initiative?
it was being funded with state. Right now, the stuff that's being built out is using state money. So
it's not a big corporation coming in and laying. Oh, that's wonderful. That's great.
It's a municipal effort with right now state funds, and we're trying to identify what the priorities are. The goal would be to get the loop from Danvers through Beverly into Wenham, Hamilton, and Essex completed this year, and then we'd need to try to close or finish the loop by connecting Essex to Manchester and Manchester back to Wenham, and then you'd kind of have a loop that would, or Manchester back to Beverly, either or, and that would kind of close the circuit. But Topsfield's interested, Marblehead wants to be in, so there's Ipswich potentially. So there's other players that were in Middleton. Topsfield and Middleton are involved as a separate branch off of Danvers, but it was actually the two of those towns that put forward the request and asked us to join.
That's great.
So,
That's interesting.
so it's something that we're going to work on in pieces. The recommendation of the feasibility report was that there is potential there, but it could be done in a way that's kind of a la carte. Towns can choose what benefits them to join the region for, and back out of other things that it doesn't make sense on. So we're working, and actually Andy Wood's helping us make assessments of the things that Hamilton can take advantage of in that. Just unfortunately nothing that's going to really mean a big financial impact in this current fiscal budget season, but I hope
be
in the
determined
future
down
we
the
could
road.
be down the road.
Yeah, because the software cost it adds up pretty quickly.
Software costs and replacement of
hardware and stuff
as well,
like that,
so.
yeah.
I am fading fast. Would you mind if I skipped out?
No, not at all.
Are you sure?
No, not at all.
No, feel better.
Oh, no, I'm fine. It's just, I was up really late last night.
Hope you get some rest, Darcy.
Yes, thank you.
Another one was, where was I here? And this is something that's been kind of talked about. I know Boston is doing it or trying to do it. Some of the pilot programs, pilot payments, making, schools such as Gordon Conwell some kind of a pilot payment or some type of a fee. And I don't know if that's anything that interests us, or at least looking into
We have
and
task
what
force
Boston's doing and stuff like that, and maybe the Gordon College.
So the task force is trying to get something done with that.
Figure something out as well.
Yeah. Right now, I could say that the task force is looking into some kind of arrangement with Gordon Conwell. Gordon Conwell has been upfront that, given their current financial condition, they can't make a financial payment to us, but they're willing to
Right,
do
some
other
other
things
kind
that
of
can help.
ideas outside the box,
And,
yeah.
and the task force is working on those things. As far as what Boston's tried to do, I think Boston has several $100 million worth of pilot agreements, and they get a fraction of that actual in payment. So it's important to try, and it's important to have those conversations and get those nonprofit partners, and really in this case we're only talking about Gordon Conwell here, interested in helping the town, but we don't have a lot of real ability to even hold them to it. Even if they sign it, they don't have to make a payment.
Right.
State law doesn't require it.
Right.
Joe, can I just ask a question? What about Pingree? Does Pingree pay us a pilot?
No.
No.
So just wondering why we're, okay, they don't send kids to our schools, obviously, but.
It's not, it'd be difficult to, I mean, it wouldn't be impossible, but it'd be a little bit more difficult to quantify what the impact of having Pingree in town would be.
Mostly roads, as we've just talked, traffic.
We've had
roads.
we've had some talks
Yeah.
over the years with Pingree, not so much about pilot, but about exchange of fields and stuff like that, and they've been fairly receptive. I don't know how much follow through there's been on it.
From talking to Sean, when we need fields, they provide them, and they don't really give us a hard time. They don't necessarily charge us what they would normally charge an outside vendor. I know they've worked with the regional school district. That's really something that was more beneficial to the school district than it is to the town, because we're able to usually handle most of our field needs for town sports, town's youth sports.
How big
on
is
our
their,
fields, but-
here's another kind of thing. So when we have town meeting, are we paying the schools anything for rental of the gym or Winthrop and stuff like that? I know we pay for chair rental and different things like that, and town meeting ends up being about $3,000 or $4,000, I think, every time we have one for just kind of offset costs, right? But
Yeah, I mean, if anything, we're paying for the custodians, but I don't remember getting a bill, but.
there's no, I don't think there is. I was just gonna say if there was, maybe we look at the size of Pingree's Fieldhouse and see if we could do a meeting there or something like that. I don't know, maybe just kind of thinking outside the box a little bit, but.
I just wondered, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
That was it.
That was it. Did we regionalize our health department? Have we looked into that?
No,
Like
we could look into it. We could look into that.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking of some things that kind of tick off. I know our animal control and a lot of other things we're kind of regionalizing, and health department might be one that we could have some cost savings in. I think there was some talks of it years ago, but I don't. Maybe that's when I'm thinking of someone backed out on the deal and it kind of fell through before your time. And then health insurance. We rebid our health insurance a handful of years ago. Would it be something to look into? We had talked about.
So as far as I know, we stayed with Maya.
Right.
If we go out to market, we leave Maya. And then what we know is, we got a good deal last year. We had a private broker looking at the market, and they told us to just stay with Maya, and it worked out. We analyzed that this year, and
what's our increase this year?
We're projecting 7%. Last year was just 2 and some change,
Yeah.
2.3%, something like that. That's a tough one. Generally what happens is that if you leave Maya, you have to be out for at least 2 years before you can try to get back in.
Right.
The insurance companies all know that. So they
Right. They bid accordingly,
They
right.
bid accordingly. So you can get a really good deal in year one, and then all your rates will jump up in year two.
Right, you're up to
and you don't really
11%
have-
or more in year 2.
You
and-
can't go back to Maya until you finish that year
Right,
two.
you're stuck. Yeah. Have we been taking advantage of, I know Maya and the other insurance company offer seminars and nutrition stuff, and have we been doing that to lower our rate at all?
We've done some of that stuff, and when the broker that we were using was also offering kind of some seminars to employees to talk to them about plan design and things. We're not, I think that next year, when we don't have any contracts to negotiate, might be a time to start looking at what our insurance alternatives would be, because that might be a place that we could try to save some money, but we're doing pretty good right now on it.
Yeah, and we're kind of tough because we're
large-
such a small organization, right? We had asked the schools a handful of years ago to go with them, and they weren't interested because we're smaller and we have a lot of people that are older and close to retirement, and
We're skewing their demo.
we were going to blow their average kind of there.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know if it'd be worth looking at negotiating again and talking to Anthony over in Wenham and seeing if we could combine both
So
towns.
Wenham
and
left.
They left Maya.
And they're projecting.
Are they in the GIC or?
No.
Something
They're
else.
on the market. They're with Harvard Pilgrim or Tufts or somebody, which I think they're projecting a larger increase than we are this year, which is that's the.
Par for the course, right, with that switch. And I'm just trying to think, because healthcare is one of those things that it just keeps going up.
We do have a situation where we have a kind of veteran staff in some departments, and that does eventually catch up to you, unfortunately. We've had a couple of disability claims and a couple long-term out
right.
workers' comp type things that also that have kind of skewed our numbers in those areas.
Right.
So there's not really, that's kind of the cost of doing business, but we are constantly evaluating that. I know Marissa just had meetings with the insurance folks, and we're comfortable that, where 2 years ago the market was projecting double-digit increases in insurance. We got a 2% last year, and we're projecting a 7% this year. So,
right,
we're in that.
It's going up, but it's not as bad as I think when we went out we changed last time, we were looking at a 12 or 15% increase, and we went back out and asked them to look at their rates again, and they worked with us, I think, is what happened.
That's what wanted to happen. So there's a small consultant that we work with. We did not renew the contract with the broker this year. We're trying to take a year off and see if Maya treats us well.
Yeah.
We can always hire them back again next year. But for right now, I think we're comfortable with what
it is.
projection is for
Yeah.
FY21. So.
And so I have some things on here too that are like more maybe planning board type stuff. You know, like our nuisance dilapidated buildings bylaw.
I don't want to work with the planning board.
But
just kidding.
You know, I just think that we've seen the place on Rock Maple, and we know we're kind of, our hands are tied a bit with things, and it's, you know, that I'm thinking of that specific property where they're at a point now where I think the neighborhood is happier because there's been some work done to it, but it's not done in the timeline that we wanted, but they've done enough to get off
Maple,
of
it's the side street off of Rock Maple there.
Maya Road, sorry, Maya Road. So it's one of those things where maybe that bylaw needs to be tightened up a little bit. And a few years ago, we had a bunch of kind of phase 2 bylaw priorities after our phase 1 just general rewrite of our bylaws to get them up to mass general law standards. And I think some of those things have been addressed, but there's a good handful of them still that weren't addressed. And then just some kind of joint service stuff like COA, Veterans Affairs, stuff like that. You know, can we find any cost savings in working more Veterans Affairs stuff or COA or other departments that we have?
You know, I think those are good suggestions in the sense that every little bit that you work on to conserve your budget is
Right.
it all adds up, and I think
there's no silver bullet here.
Right,
I think
right.
it's
just little things that we consolidate and regionalize. I don't know if that's a bad word, but sort of combine these services, and it all adds up. I think those are great suggestions.
And then another one goes to HDC. They had a charrette a while ago, and just general downtown improvements. And Jeff, that was always kind of your stump speech stuff, was HDC improvements and stuff, and sidewalks and benches and stuff. And we talked about branding downtown to make it more kind of inviting for pedestrians and walking traffic for shopping and stuff like that. I think something like that in a capital plan, or at least the sidewalks in the capital plan sometime in the future would be good, because the sidewalks they're not very good. You know, and then I think with that would be at the same time some type of a development into that downtown branding. You know, we've got this equestrian community. I think that would fit really well with something in the downtown area, and promoting that to get some, it's tourism, I guess, or that kind of thing.
Oh, I'm going to get myself in trouble. I was going to make a joke, but then I realized if I say it and people take it the wrong way.
It sounded great in your head.
I actually think it's funny, and there's nothing inappropriate about it, but it could still get some people's teeth in it.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I give you permission.
We could put parking meters on the street that look like little tie-off posts for horses.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
There's one.
I'm not suggesting parking meters in downtown.
Well, we've got two behind the weather vane.
Downtown to need a parking meters, but
We've got two behind the weather vane. If you bring your horse down there, you can tie up.
Yeah.
I'll bring Sapphire down.
Well, you know, actually, I'd love to talk to the HDC or even the shop local folks. I had a kind of a funny idea a couple years ago about doing a downtown event centered around having people bring their horses into downtown for the day. You know, I don't know that it's appropriate, because I don't know if horse owners like their horses to walk on pavement, and all the roads that get you into the downtown are paved. But when we were talking about doing complete streets.
But I think events like that with complete, if we do complete streets, and then you'd have events like that, it's going to bring people
that would bring people into town for, you know, those kind of, it'd be kind of, you know.
Yeah, they won't have any place to park.
The horses,
the horses will take over the parking spaces.
That's, you know, anything that's just right, branding the town and who we are, what we are. Joe, I'm
I mean, yeah, and to the whole thing, we're always talking about how we all love Hamilton, we love the character of the town, et cetera. Well, why not promote that character to bring other people in to help benefit the downtown businesses and the town in general?
And I think I had spoken with Angela a few times, and you know, she is very much for supporting the small business owners and local shops. I mean, I think the Shop Local brand is a great idea. And it will bring not only people from the outside, but us. We can all just walk down and use the resources in town. I think she has a really nice idea.
Schooling field lease? It's one of
I thank you for sending it to me, and now I need to follow up.
Okay.
The what?
Schooling field lease was never signed, I guess, or never fully executed, so I need to reach out to the folks at Myopia. Know anybody up at Myopia you can put me in touch with, John? I'll be reaching out to them. I got the document from Sean just a couple weeks ago, so I'll be trying to follow
schooling
up.
field?
Where the pool is,
Oh, okay.
was never fully executed.
Okay, I'm sorry, okay.
So we need to kind of close that loop. It would be a real unfortunate thing for the Myopia to get upset with us and then try to kick us off when we've got a pool there, so.
Okay, no, that's fine.
I have a few smaller things, but I won't mention them tonight. I'll just send them to you, Joe. They're kind of just follow-up stuff, but,
Do you want me to take what was discussed tonight and the previous goals and kind of assemble them into something that you can all consider?
yeah, and then we can tick some off if we want, or include them in wherever.
All right.
That'd be
I will
great.
do that.
So,
Two last things, and then, I know.
Monopolizing the mic tonight.
Monopolizing the mic tonight. So,
well, I'm just thinking time-wise.
one is I went to a seminar probably 3 years ago up at Woodman's. It was the Massachusetts Film Board plus local tourism. It was put on by the North Shore Better Business Bureau or something like that, tourist board. And Hamilton doesn't have a film rep. And so we could appoint anyone in town or one person on this board or any board to be basically a liaison, could even be you, Joe. And what it is basically gets us on a list that says that we are welcoming film crews in the town. We've had a handful of films in town over the years, but this would help kind of leverage some of that. And basically, when you go, if you're a film crew or producer or whatever, you can go into this basically database, and it brings up all these towns' names and shows you pictures of the town and stuff like that. We could even submit pictures, and then film crews come out and scout the locations, and then they come and they film. And
the problem with that is, having lived through the Appleton Farm filming, and then over just am aware of the issues with Groton House. Those film crews really take over, and you grant them access to Section X, and by the end of it, they've taken over everything. They run behind, and I have a friend who does this, but I would think carefully about that. I mean, it's a nice idea, and I love that we're thinking creatively. But I think we should really think about the impact of something like that. We're a small little town, and I don't know. Maybe we could make it work, but I would like us to think carefully about it.
yeah, I'm fine with that. I just think that there's been a handful of films in town that we've approved locations for over the years, and they've been perfectly fine. You know, I hate to ruin it all because of a couple bad apples with something that's gone over, but.
Well, you know, and I'm not saying they're all bad, but I think it's something we should look at really carefully. The impact upon the town, the rhythm of the town. I would like to really think about that.
Last thing, unrelated. At ATM, can we work on talking to Sean and the sports leagues about not having sports on that morning?
My understanding is that's already been started, that conversation's already been started by parents and coaches.
Perfect.
I actually spoke to a resident this morning who coaches, and said that they have already spoken to their sport association about not having any games on that day.
Right, because we've got Hamilton and one. I mean, we can't really account for the travel leagues that our kids are going to Danvers or whatever, but at least Hamilton, Wenham.
Yep. So, and that person was under the impression that was in soccer, that person was under the impression that similar conversations had already been had with lacrosse and baseball as well.
Perfect, perfect.
So, Joe, I just have one quick thing. Sorry,
I feel like I should be like, I yield the remainder of my time to.
I've had some residents comment about our website. And I don't know if you have a dedicated person who really looks at that. The comments have been that the town website is really hard to navigate through. That there are a lot of outdated bits of information. Say, I think Jim Hankins' name stayed on the Concom for a while. So that, I think, should be a priority. I think it reflects on our town being diligent in those things. So I think that might be something to work on.
Okay, thank you. It's my plan to work on it. My plan was to have that new community projects person have that as part of their role.
I understand.
And got stolen away, so I got to start all over again.
You will. You'll find somebody great because everybody you've hired has been super. But may I make the motion?
Sure.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn the Board of Selectmen meeting tonight.
Hallelujah.
Can I add new business?
Sure, of course.
Discussion.
Discussion.
New business, water rates.
I was already planning to bring it to you on the 24th.
The accepted roadway policy and the HDC members vote
Well, you said the 9th.
verification, approval, whatever.
That'll be the second
Will be the next,
announcement.
not this next meeting, but the meeting after.
Yeah.
On future casting.
Yep.
I guess.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion?
No, sir.
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Awesome.
Thanks for sticking with us, Duke.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody at
Thank
home.
you so much for sticking around.